I made a faux pas there. It was a paw that was made of faux. Kind of like, you know, the programming equivalent. Kind of like, you know, the programming equivalent of when you, you know, you go to lunch and you're sit at the wrong seat and everyone's embarrassed and it's just kind of this, you know, this horrible thing. You just kind of run screaming and crying from the restaurant and it scars you for life. So anyway, let's just pretend this stuff never happened, because this was just like bad, and we don't want it to happen. So really, I'm just gonna vaporize that. It's gone. Like we're gonna pretend that never happened, and I mean that like really literally. Like we're just gonna pretend it never happened ever, and then we're just gonna say that these are all gonna be back to the way they were, right? We're like I said, it was just a mistake. I admit that, and we're you know, like don't harp on it, man. Right? I already said it was a mistake. Why you gotta keep bringing it up? You know, let's just move past it. We need to move past it. You know, don't let your whole life be defined by the one time bad lunch you ate. You know. So anyway, bad lunch you. Don't. We need to move past it. You know, don't let your whole life be defined by the one time bad lunch you ate, you know? So anyway, let's go in here. Open debug block. Yeah. Let's go. Don't let your whole life be defined by the one time bad lunch you ate, you know? So anyway, let's go in here. Open debug block. Yes, that's got to be this way. Again, this is just putting it back to the way that it was. Right? Debug push struct. Oops. Okay, so now in theory we're totally set now for what we wanted, except for the one thing, which is the stored event situation. And so now we have to do is we have to just have a way of, again, doing what we wanted to do with the debug arena stuff. We wanted to do frames and the stored events. We wanted those to work so that as frames come in and stored events come in, we will free frames as necessary to make sure that we could do. So I think that's all right. So I there. All right. So I think that's a pretty. You don't. One of the things I say a lot of times when we talk about programming is it's just like you don't want to eat more lunch. Programming is it's just like you don't want to eat more lunch than you can reasonably digest, right? So a lot of times people go into something and their eyes are too big for their stomach and they'll just way overeat the lunch. And so what I'm trying to do here is just keep lunch to a reasonable amount of food so that we don't get too fat, but we do get enough food to keep ourselves going good. And so then there's always, again, like I always say, there's always lunch tomorrow. And so that's, tomorrow's lunch will be will be just as tasty as today's lunch. And we can eat some of those other foods that we didn't eat today at that time. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and go to the Q&A. Oops, if I type it correctly. So if anyone has any questions about where we're at, please prefix them with Q: and ask me, and I will answer them. Miblo, when we come to do the AI system, do you think it'd be reasonable to give the dudes a gather lunch behavior? Well, if there's lunch, I don't know that the game has much lunch concepts in it, but, we could try. Insofar as, what did you have for lunch? I had campfire barbecue for lunch, which is the best barbecue in Seattle. It's very, very good. It's only available on Thursdays and Fridays. Or if you live in Georgetown on Saturdays, but I don't. So it's only on Thursdays and Fridays, and it's a fantastic, fantastic barbecue. Anyone who's in Seattle is doing themselves a disservice if they do not go to Campfire Barbecue on Thursdays and Fridays. So you should do that. So that we could to keep ourselves going good. And so then there's always good. And so then there's always again, like I always say, there's always lunch tomorrow. And so that's, again, like we could food to keep ourselves going good. And so then there's always keep ourselves going good. And so then there's always, again, like I always say, there's always lunch tomorrow. And so that's, tomorrow's lunch will be will be just as tasty as today's lunch. And we can eat some of those other foods that we didn't eat today at that time. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and go to the Q&A. Oops, if I type it correctly. So if anyone has any questions about where we're at, please prefix them with Q: and ask me, and I will answer them. Miblo, when we come to do the AI system, do you think it'd be reasonable to give the dudes a gather lunch behavior? Well, if there's lunch, I don't know that the game has much lunch concepts in it, but, we could try. Insofar as, what did you have for lunch? I had campfire barbecue for lunch, which is the best barbecue in Seattle. It's very, very good. A lot of time debugging, so I don't. That's very difficult. Or if you're, so if anyone has any questions about, it's a good stopping. It's just like you don't want to eat more. We'll go into some, and so what I'm trying to do is fat, but we do get enough food to keep ourselves going good. And so then there's always, again, like I always say, there's always lunch tomorrow. And so that's, tomorrow's lunch will be will be just as tasty as today's lunch, and we can eat some of those other foods that we didn't eat today at that time. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and at that time. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and go to the Q&A. Oops, if I type it correctly. So if anyone has any questions, oops, if I type it correctly. So if anyone has any questions about where we're at, please prefix them with Q colon and ask me, and I will answer them. Miblo, when we come to do the AI system, do you think it'd be reasonable to give the dudes a gather lunch behavior? Well, you know, if there's lunch, I don't know that the game has much lunch. Well, do you think it'd be reasonable? Miblo, when we come to do the AI system, do you think it'd be reasonable to give the dudes a gather lunch behavior? Well, you know, if there's lunch, I don't know that the game has much lunch concepts in it, but you know, we could try. Insofar as what did you have? We could try. Insofar as what did you have for lunch? I had campfire barbecue for lunch, which is the best barbecue in Seattle. It's very, very good. It's only available on Thursdays and Fridays, or if you live in Georgetown on Saturdays, but I don't. So it's only on Thursdays and Fridays, and it's a fantastic, fantastic barbecue. Anyone who's in Seattle is doing themselves a disservice if they do not go to Campfire Barbecue on Thursdays and Fridays. So you should do that. Doritos Ranger. Doritos Ranger, imagine that you're young again and you're eating your lunch, and you can choose between a C and Java-like language in what you can work with memory in much C-like way, but that language would say how to implement some ideas, like a Python is about line offsets, which is not good, I think. What would you choose then, and why? I so don't understand that question at all. Basically, I think C is a perfectly fine language right up until the part where you try to do more higher level organization and generation of code. Things I would tweak. So I would say there's to it that I would want. However, I don't. It is a not useful thing. During HMH Con, will there be an organized lunch at the Campfire Barbecue? No, because Handmade Con is on Saturday, and you cannot get Campfire Barbecue downtown on Saturday. As far as I know, anyway. They're usually in Georgetown, and that's very difficult to get to. Does Emacs offer more syntax? Does Emacs offer more syntax support than what I am seeing at the moment? Do you mean syntax highlighting support? And if you mean syntax highlighting support, the answer is yes. There's a lot of weird syntax highlighting support in there, but I don't use a lot of it. Let's see. Any other questions about the code? Is there anything that could be considered a free lunch in low-level? Is there anything that could be considered a free lunch in low-level optimization? Sure. When Intel comes out with like a new chip that happens to run your code faster, and you didn't actually do anything, that's definitely a free lunch. Cuber Caleb, fair warning: the optimizer might store the strings in the same place, which will break the whole GUID. Fair warning. Cuber Caleb, fair warning: the optimizer might store the strings in the same place, which will break the whole GUID thing. No, it can't. You know, there's no way for it to store two strings in the same place if they're different, right? So unless you're thinking of something I'm not thinking of, that's not actually possible. BTN Games, do you suggest possible? BTN Games, do you suggest programming should be snacked upon throughout the day as an alternative to a 3-course code feast? In general, I would say that you want to do at least 2 blocks of 2 hours worth of coding every day at a bare minimum. and preferably 3. And I mean actual coding. Hours of lots of things, because I manage my programming some job. Then you should be, if you can, 2 hour, I'll get the witness or whatever. To something's wrong. Insofar as, why do you think there have been no good new languages since C? Are all the language designers out to lunch these days? Yes, they are. The reason that I think is because C was like the last time where great programmers made a language. And as far as I know, like pretty much every language that was made since then was made by people who actually aren't great production, like commercial code shipping programmers. I mean, the people who made C like made Unix, right? Like they knew what they were doing. And they knew how to like ship actual code, like actual software. And I think that that's part of it. So one of the reasons I'm so excited about JAI is because JAI, like what Jonathan Blow's language is, it's the first time a programmer who actually really knows what they're doing is making a language and has shipped multiple very complicated, very advanced things by themselves in some cases, right? I just don't know very many other times when that's ever happened. And so I think that tends to be one of the big reasons that there are so many languages nowadays, but most of them just really aren't very good at actually achieving high quality software. It is just because the people who made them weren't experts in making high quality software. They were either academic or they were, trying to make, low quality software quickly or things like that. And so the goals or the knowledge were not there, one or the other. Bookie's Revenge, do you feel there's a perfect balance between test-based one or the other? Bookie's Revenge, do you feel there's a perfect balance between test-based coding, so more efficiency optimization, or do you prefer one over the other? I'm not sure I understand the question. I feel like test-based coding is a totally reasonable thing to do as long as you're not spending more time total in development. I've said this many times. Basically, development should be looked at as a sort of global optimization problem. What you're trying to do is you're trying to take the least amount of time to make the best possible code, right, for the thing you're doing. And so if test-based code to make not, then you can't make so that it, if it's not, so you need to know to get you might not. I don't know why. It should be geared to. What are your thoughts on Clang? Like trying to build it in the source tree, like the source code is a mess. It's a nightmare. It's way too object oriented, and it's just like it takes thousands of lines of code in Clang to do something that you should be able to do in like one line of code or something, right? So I don't like that aspect of it. It's actually coding practice. That said, like I don't have much of a thought about Unity. I don't Unity. It's I'm not sure what that refers to. Flag, I think. The Maxis, I think he. The Maxis, I think he meant string literals, like the OG flag, I think. Not sure what that refers to. What do you think about Unity, etc.? What do you think about Unity, etc.? I don't have much of a thought about Unity. Any licensable tool, you can really always evaluate it the same way. Does it do what you need it to do? And if so, then you could use it. If not, then you can't. I think the biggest problem appreciate what actually goes into making a quality game quality. Give you a high at the point out good. War you make. for them, and they don't work most of the, and that's plenty of shouldn't. What's the biggest hurdle you've had to overcome so far on this endeavor? I don't think we've really had hurdles to overcome. I mean, we're just doing programming, you know. Killer Fred 3000, what do you suggest for people who are in the first year of C++ to do as projects for coding throughout the day? Feel free to skip if you've answered this before. I'm not sure what you mean by coding throughout the day, but you know, if you're just starting out, I've said this many times, I think Asteroids is the best thing to make, because it's the simplest, really. It's the most simple game you can do, and but it still features all of the basic components. So I always say make an Asteroid game, because if you can't make an Asteroid game, then you're not ready to do any of these more advanced things, right? So you should focus on like understanding how to make an Asteroid game first, and then you move forwards, right? Handmade Hero is like way more complicated than an Asteroid game, right? And so like someday when I do like the intro to C part thing or whatever we do, I do like, here's how you make just asteroids. It's like a little ship, it can shoot like a missile, and there's a little asteroid on the screen and it can hit it, right? Like just doing that. And that's a good way to learn, because it's so basic, it's so simple, that you can really just focus on can you just do the just very basic aspects of programming. And so that's, you know, that's a good one, I think. Jesse Meyer, have you seen John Cleese's talk on creativity? If so, what are your thoughts on it? Yes, I have. I liked it. Maybe that's a question to ask in the pre-stream. We could talk more about it. Insofar as how many more features will the debug system get? It already eats most other engines' lunch. Well, it's not really there yet. Like I said, we kind of had to do our organization and get these things right. So we still need to now go in and put in the interface and like kind of get that data working in a better sort of flow, so we can see stuff, and then I'll be pretty happy with it. So it's not really that it's going to get lots of features per se, but we just need to clean everything up and make it actually work well, because we haven't gotten to that point yet. So I don't know that we'll necessarily add more features. We might add some diagramming support, but that's about it. Lexington, do you feel that taking Calculus 1-2 is needed to become a good programmer? Probably not if you are never doing any simulation code. You could probably get away with not taking Calculus. However, if you're going to do any simulation, and when I say simulation, I mean really any simulation. So rendering would be included in there, because that's simulation of light. Sound would be included in there, because simulation of vibration propagation. Certainly any physics, certainly any even fake physics, all of that stuff, you need calculus. So if you're planning on doing like game programming, it's no question you need calculus. If you're planning on doing a web server, probably don't need calculus. That'd be my guess. It was actually a GF flag for the MSVC compiler, enable string pooling, lumping all string literals into a read-only portion of memory, so it only stores one of each different string. Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't know why that was brought up, though, because we don't care if it pools strings. It can't pool two strings that are different strings. String pooling only pools two strings that are the same string, right? And since we created a different string for each GUID, they won't ever collapse, right? Does that make sense? So it's like, we don't care what the compiler does. Whatever it did to produce strings that were all the strings we told it to produce, they're going to be at different locations in memory because they're actually different strings. It can only pool strings if we generate the same string for two GUIDs, but in that case we would want them to collapse, because that means the GUID is the same. And our definition of the system is if the GUID's the same, then it's the same, right? Let's see. I'm just roids. Do you think there? I'm just roids. Do you think there really hasn't been a good language in C? Period. Yes, I would probably say that. Although to be fair, I don't know like all languages, right? I mean, there are so many languages out there that to really say that definitively, you'd have to be someone who just studies languages all the time. What I could perhaps state more definitively is I don't know of another good language that's been made since C. And to be fair, I would soften that slightly. I don't know of another language that's been developed since C that isn't just basically C with a few minor additions or something. Because there have been things like D, for example, or something, which maybe, I haven't really spent any time with it, but that maybe is like as good as C for what you're doing, but doesn't really appreciably advance beyond it, right? And so that's probably more the right way to say it. So yeah. Insofar as, what if it doesn't pool strings and two same string literals get different addresses? Would the system lose its lunch? No, because again, that's fine. Each one of our debug locations is intentionally generates a different string so that each location gets a different GUID. So we don't actually want it to pool the strings for any particular reason, but we also don't care if it does because since they're all different, they won't pool. And Pseudonym 73, I actually don't believe that good language is relative to what you're doing. That's kind of the place where I sort of depart from that. I always prefer to program in C pretty much, period. So if I wanted to do something Prolog-like, I would want to implement whatever the part of Prolog is that I wanted in C, because what invariably I find is that, let's say I did actually go use Prolog to do it, whatever the Prolog like compiler or interpreter I use to do that, I probably can't run it on all the machines I might want to run it on, and then I end up in the situation where like my code doesn't work anymore or whatever. Or it's too slow and I can't optimize it because it's like someone else's like crappy old Prolog, whatever. So I actually literally no longer write anything that isn't in C. Like the Handmade Hero GitHub validator, I actually wrote myself in C, right? And the reason that I did that was just because every time I've ever done something like, oh, it's just a little web thing, I'll just write it in PHP or whatever, I always regret it. It always crashes. They change like the PHP to a different version and now it doesn't run anymore. Or like I try to like move it from one machine to the other, but like, oh, it required like MySQL to store the thing and that's not running and it goes, right? Whereas here I just know, nope, here's the C code, I recompiled it. It never crashes, never goes down. It can handle like a massive amount of throughput. So I don't have to worry about like my machine being slow or something like that. And like, hey, guess what? The Handmade Hero GitHub validator has been running for like God knows how long. Never had a problem with it. It's trivial for me to just move to another machine. You just copy 2 files and you're done. So yeah, like, no, I am so not okay with the concept that like, oh, I'll just use this other language. I've never had that work. Never, not even once. So yeah, so I use C even when I'm just gonna do like a little, a little thing that's not meant to be whatever. And so one of the reasons that I really want, like I said, a real strong successor to C is because like right now I lean very heavily on metaprogramming to do stuff. And also I can't really take advantage of a lot of people's like libraries and stuff because people don't tend to write libraries for C anymore, right? They tend to write libraries for like C# or Java or something. And so I would really like there to be a successor to C that comes along so that the world would start using that. And so there'd be a lot more of that happening and a lot less of these other languages, which I think are pretty much universally bad and literally should never be used. All right, I'm going to go ahead. All right, I'm going to go ahead and wind down here. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. That's about it for today. Until tomorrow, have fun programming, and I'll see you guys on the internet. And, don't forget to eat lunch, right? Most important meal of the day. Take it easy, everyone.